A biker finds a sketchbook tossed behind a dumpster. Inside aren't random drawings, but precise portraits of every man in the club, marked with scars, habits, and details no outsider should know. Even stranger, they're drawn as protectors. Whoever made this wasn't admiring them. She was asking for help. Mick had been taking out the trash for 40 years. First at his old man's garage, then at the factory, and now at the clubhouse. It wasn't glamorous, but someone had to do it. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the sun was cutting through the alley behind the Black Hound's headquarters, making the greasy pavement shimmer like oil on water. He almost missed it. The sketchbook was wedged between a crushed beer can and a pile of cardboard boxes, its black cover barely visible against the shadow of the dumpster. Mick had a habit of noticing things, came with the territory of being a Marine before he ever threw on a leather cut. He picked it up, flipped it open, and froze. The first page showed Tommy Wrench Morrison, the club's VP, astride his Harley. But this wasn't just any drawing. Tommy's bike was engulfed in flames that didn't burn. They protected. Behind him, massive wings spread from his shoulders, feathered and powerful. A sword hung at his hip. Above his head, in careful script, was written, Guardian. Mick turned the page. There was Mahoney, the club enforcer, portrayed the same way, wings, weapons, holy fire. The nickname read, Shield. Page after page revealed every member of the Black Hounds, each transformed into something between warrior and angel. The detail was staggering. Whoever drew these had studied them closely. The scar over Wrench's left eye, the way Mahoney's beard braided at the end, even the dent in Mick's own riding helmet from that accident in '09. What have you got there? Wrench had wandered outside for a smoke, noticing Mick standing stock still by the dumpster. Mick handed him the sketchbook without a word. Wrench's cigarette nearly fell from his lips. What the hell? Within minutes, half the club had gathered in the alley, passing the sketchbook around like it was evidence at a crime scene. The reactions ranged from confusion to unease to something that looked almost like reverence. Who would draw this? Asked Snake, the club's youngest patch holder, barely 23. And why leave it here? Added Mahoney, his thick arms crossed over his chest. Jess, Wrench's wife and the only woman who had a permanent seat at the club table, examined the sketches more carefully. She ran a tattoo parlor downtown and knew art when she saw it. This isn't amateur work. Look at the shading, the perspective. Whoever did this has real talent. But why us? Snake repeated. Why make us look like angels? Mick finished quietly. He'd been staring at his own portrait, Iron Brother, and something about it made his chest tight. He'd spent 30 years being called a lot of things. Angel wasn't one of them. Wrench pulled out his phone, photographing several pages. I'm sending these to Sabrina. Sabrina managed the community center 3 blocks over and knew every kid in the neighborhood. The reply came back in less than 5 minutes. That's the girl who sits outside the library, always drawing. Quiet kid. Foster care, I think. The library. Mick knew exactly where that was. Same place he picked up audiobooks for the long rides. He'd seen her there himself now that he thought about it. Small girl, always in the same gray hoodie, sketchbook balanced on her knees. She'd watch people pass with these huge, careful eyes, like she was memorizing the world one face at a time. Let's go, Mick said, tucking the sketchbook under his arm. Go where? Snake asked. To find out why someone thinks we're worth drawing with wings. They took the bikes. When they pulled up, Mick held up the sketchbook through the library window. The librarian's alarm shifted to recognition. The girl was exactly where Sabrina said she'd be, sitting on the bench outside the library's side entrance, hood up despite the warm afternoon. Her left arm was in a cast, covered completely in drawings. Engines, helmets, leather cuts, and everywhere, woven between the mechanical drawings, were wings. She saw them coming and her pencil stopped mid-stroke. Her shoulders drew inward, but she didn't run. Mick approached slowly, the way you'd approach anything wounded and wild. He sat down on the far end of the bench, leaving space between them, and placed the sketchbook on the weathered wood. This yours? He asked. The girl's eyes flicked to the sketchbook, then to his face, then back down. She nodded once. It's really good, he continued. Best thing anyone's ever drawn of me, that's for sure. A tiny smile ghosted across her face, then vanished. I'm Mick. These are my brothers. He gestured to the others, standing back near the bikes. We found your book behind our clubhouse. Been trying to figure out why you'd draw us like that. The girl was silent for a long moment, her good hand gripping the edge of her cast. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet Mick had to lean in to hear it. You ride loud. Mick blinked. Yeah, we do. She looked up at him then, and he saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was the same look he'd seen in Fallujah, in the faces of kids who'd lived through things no child should ever witness. He's scared of loud, she whispered, and Mick understood. Mick asked if she was hungry. Wrench brought sandwiches from across the street. They sat in patient silence while she ate. Her name was Delilah, 12 years old, currently living with her third foster family in 2 years, the Hendersons, a couple in their 50s who meant well, but were already fostering 2 other kids and working full-time jobs. She didn't blame them for not having time to notice things. Most people didn't notice things, but Delilah noticed everything. She'd been watching the Black Hounds for 6 weeks, learned their routines, their bikes, their faces, started drawing them because that's what she did when she was afraid. She drew the things she wished were real. What are you afraid of? Jess asked gently. She joined them on the bench, sensing the girl might respond better to another woman. Delilah's jaw tightened. She set down her sandwich and pulled a folded piece of paper from her hoodie pocket. It was a printout from the Department of Corrections website. Inmate release schedule. A name was highlighted in yellow, Fred Vance. Release date, 60 days from now. My mom's ex-boyfriend, Delilah said, her voice still barely above a whisper. He lived with us for 2 years. When I was 9, I told my teacher about what he did when Mom was at work. They arrested him. He got 3 years. She traced the edge of her cast with one finger. He broke my arm on his way out the door. Told me he'd finish what he started when he got back. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mick felt his hands curl into fists, nails digging into his palms. Beside him, Mahoney had gone very quiet, the dangerous kind of quiet. Where's your mom now? Wrench asked. Rehab. 4th time. She chose him over me. There was no emotion in Delilah's voice when she said it, which somehow made it worse. Social worker says she's doing better. But, she shrugged. Doesn't matter. He knows where I am. Foster placements are supposed to be confidential, but he has friends. People who owe him things. And the police? Jess pressed. They said they'll investigate if he makes contact. If. Delilah looked at each of them in turn. I've been moved 3 times because people got scared. First family heard he was asking around the neighborhood. Second family found him waiting outside their house one night. He didn't do anything. Just stood there under the streetlight, watching. They called the cops, but he was gone by the time they arrived. Third family. She swallowed hard. They just said they couldn't handle the stress. So the Hendersons don't know, Mick concluded. Delilah shook her head. If I tell them, they'll send me somewhere else. And the next place and the next place. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being scared in houses where nobody really sees me. She opened the sketchbook to a page near the back. Herself surrounded by grasping shadows, the bikers circling her with wings spread wide. I watched you for weeks, she continued, something stronger entering her voice. I saw how people cross the street when you ride by, how they look away when you walk into stores. Even the guys who hang out behind the liquor store, the ones who scared me, they don't mess with you. She looked directly at Mick. You ride loud. Your engines sound like thunder, like something unstoppable. And I thought if maybe you knew, if you saw me, if I could just... Her voice cracked. He's scared of loud things. He's scared of being noticed. He does everything in quiet corners where nobody's watching. And you figured a motorcycle club isn't exactly known for being quiet, Wrench said softly. I figured you were my last chance. Delilah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know it's stupid. I know you don't know me, but I didn't know what else to do. I can't fight him. The system can't protect me. So I drew what I wished was true, that someone would stand between me and the bad thing coming. Glances passed between the club members, entire conversations happening without words. Mick had been with the Black Hounds for 15 years. He knew what his brothers were thinking without a single word being said. They'd all been broken by something once. That's why men joined clubs like this, to find the family blood didn't give them, to stand with people who understood that sometimes the world ground you down and you needed brothers to help carry the weight. Finally, Mahoney spoke, his gravel voice cutting through the quiet. "What do you need, kid?" Delilah looked surprised, like she'd expected rejection or pity or promises nobody could keep. I need to not be alone when he comes. I need people who won't run. She gestured helplessly. I need loud." Mick picked up the sketchbook, looking at his own portrait again. Iron brother. Maybe she saw something in them they'd forgotten they had. "How are you with custom paint jobs?" he asked. Delilah blinked, confused by the change in subject. "What?" "We need someone to design decals for the bikes. Someone with actual talent instead of Mahoney's nephew, who can barely draw stick figures." He looked at her seriously. "It's paid work. Cash under the table until we sort out the legal stuff. Room at the clubhouse if you need it. We've got a storage area we've been meaning to convert anyway." "You're offering me a job?" Delilah's voice was incredulous. "We're offering you a place," Jess corrected. "The job comes with it. Think of it as an exchange. You make us look good, we make sure you're safe. Deal?" Delilah stared at them, this circle of leather-clad bikers who'd somehow become exactly what she'd drawn them to be. "Deal," she whispered. Delilah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. The dusty space transformed over 3 days. White walls, a second-hand desk from the thrift store, proper lighting rigged up by Snake, who'd worked as an electrician before the club. Delilah moved in on a Saturday with everything she owned fitting into 2 garbage bags and a backpack. The Hendersons signed the guardianship papers without resistance. Delilah settled in like she'd been waiting her whole life for a place that felt solid. She converted the desk into a workstation, covering it with pencils, markers, and the tablet Jess had given her from the tattoo shop's old equipment. Within a week, she designed 3 custom tank decals that Wrench immediately ordered into production. But it was the mural that really announced her presence. Mick found her one morning at dawn, standing on a ladder in the main room, sketching directly onto the wall in chalk. By afternoon, she'd convinced him to let her paint it. By evening, the entire club had gathered to watch her work. The mural showed their fallen brother, Jimmy Ghost Martinez, who'd gone down in a highway accident 2 years prior. But Delilah hadn't just copied a photo. She'd painted him mid-ride, his bike tilting into a curve, and behind him, rendered in silver and gold, were all the brothers he'd left behind, watching over him, their hands raised not in goodbye but in salute. At the bottom, in elegant script, she'd written his road name and the club motto, "Ride Forever." Mahoney cried openly. The others stood silent, several wiping their own eyes. "How did you know?" he asked Delilah, his voice thick. "You never met Ghost." "I listened," she said simply. "You all talk about him like he's still here, so I painted him that way." She became part of the rhythm after that. Mornings, Mick tutored her in math at the bar counter while the coffee brewed. Afternoons, she worked on designs or attended online classes for her homeschool program. Evenings, she'd sit in the garage watching the brothers work on bikes, sketching their hands as they adjusted chains and torqued bolts. Jess brought her to the tattoo parlor twice a week, teaching her about ink and skin and the responsibility of permanent art. Delilah laughed at Wrench's terrible jokes. She learned to play pool from Snake, who let her win exactly twice before deciding she'd earned real competition. She started talking more, her voice growing stronger, filling the space around her instead of disappearing into it. 43 days after she'd moved in, Delilah stayed late at Jess's shop, working on a design for a client's sleeve. Jess drove her back to the clubhouse around 9, pulling up to find only 3 bikes in the lot. Quiet night. Most of the brothers were at a rally 2 towns over. "You good?" Jess asked, watching Delilah gather her sketchbook. "Always am here," Delilah replied, and she meant it. 20 minutes after Jess left, Delilah's phone rang. Unknown number. Against Mick's warnings, she answered. Heavy breathing. Then a voice she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. "Hey there, little artist. Heard you've been busy." The phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the concrete floor. "Fred Vance." But he wasn't supposed to be out yet. 17 days early. Good behavior, the voice on the phone had said. Good behavior. Got out this morning, he continued, and she realized the call was on speaker. Her phone face up on the ground, his voice filling the garage. Thought I'd swing by the Henderson place. Surprise you. But guess what? You're not there anymore. They said you moved in with family friends. Now what family friends would those be? I'm real curious about these new friends of yours. About where my girl's been sleeping. I'm not your girl, she whispered to the empty garage. What was that? Speak up. You always were too quiet. Gonna have to fix that when we... She grabbed the phone and ended the call, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it again. Her breath came in short gasps. The walls felt like they were closing in, and suddenly the clubhouse, her safe place, her sanctuary, felt like a trap. He knew. Somehow he knew she wasn't at the Hendersons anymore, which meant he was looking, which meant he'd find her. Delilah ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just burst out the side door and sprinted down the alley. Her mind was static and panic, the old instinct to flee overwhelming everything else. She made it 2 blocks before her lungs screamed and her legs gave out. She collapsed against a chain-link fence, gasping, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. Can't run forever, little artist. See you soon. Attached was a photo, the clubhouse, taken from across the street. Taken tonight. He was here. He'd found her. He was watching. Delilah forced herself to breathe, forced herself to think through the terror. She pulled up mixed contact with trembling fingers and pressed call. He answered on the second ring, rally music loud in the background. Delilah? What's wrong? He found the house, she gasped. Mick, he called me. He's out early. He knows where I am. He's here, he's watching, Stay where you are. Tell me exactly where you are right now. She looked around, trying to orient herself. The fence. Behind the auto shop. The one with the yellow sign. Lock yourself in the phone booth on the corner. You see it. She did. Ancient thing that somehow still worked. 20 feet away. Get inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. We're 20 minutes out. Mick. We're coming, Delilah. All of us. He doesn't get to scare you anymore. You hear me? She heard him. And underneath his words, she heard something else. Engines starting, lots of them. A chorus of thunder preparing to roll. Delilah ran to the phone booth and pulled the door shut, bracing it with her body. She pulled out her sketchbook with shaking hands and opened to a blank page. If she was going to wait, she needed something to do with the terror coursing through her veins. She began to draw. The sound reached her first, a distant rumble that grew into thunder, then into something that shook the glass walls of the phone booth. Delilah looked up from her frantic sketching. Headlights cut through the darkness, dozens of them. The entire Black Hounds Club, plus brothers from 2 neighboring charters, rolled down the street like an army. Mick's bike led the pack. He killed his engine at the phone booth. You're safe, he said through the glass. Come on out. Delilah's legs barely held her as she pushed open the door. Mick caught her elbow, steadying her, and she saw the rest of them. 30 bikes forming a protective circle in the street, engines still rumbling low like warning growls. Wrench was already on his phone with someone. Mahoney stood with his arms crossed, scanning the shadows like he was daring something to move. Lawyers filing an emergency restraining order tonight, Wrench called out. Judge owes me a favor. It'll be active within the hour. And if he shows up before then? Snake asked, cracking his knuckles. Then we document everything and let the cops handle it, Mick said firmly, though his jaw was tight. We do this smart. No one gives this piece of garbage an excuse to play victim. But Delilah had stopped listening. Her eyes were fixed on the clubhouse, visible 2 blocks away. Something hot and fierce was building in her chest, burning away the fear. She'd run. Again. Just like always. But this time, she'd run toward something instead of just away. I need paint, she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Spray paint. Black, red, white. Whatever you have. Mick studied her face. What are you thinking, kid? I'm thinking I'm tired of him making me disappear. Her voice was stronger now, fed by anger instead of terror. I'm thinking he operates in shadows because he's counting on nobody seeing. So let's make sure everyone sees. 20 minutes later, Delilah stood in front of the clubhouse wall, for cans of spray paint at her feet and half the club watching from a respectful distance. Her hands had stopped shaking. The panic had crystallized into purpose. She started with his face, Fred Vance, drawn from memory in harsh black lines. No angel wings for this portrait. She surrounded him with barbed wire, the kind that cut and scarred, and she made sure every detail was recognizable. His weak chin, his cold eyes, the spider web tattoo on his neck that he thought made him look dangerous. Above his head, in letters 2 feet tall, "Not welcome here." Below, smaller but no less clear, "We see you. We know who you are. Leave." She worked fast, muscle memory taking over, all those hours of practice channeling into this one defiant statement. When she finished, she stepped back, chest heaving, paint on her hands and probably in her hair. The wall had become a warning and a witness. This was her testimony in spray paint and fury. "Well," Mahoney said quietly, "that's one way to send a message." They didn't have to wait long. A silver sedan rolled slowly down the street just after midnight, slowing as it approached the clubhouse. Through the windshield, Delilah could see his face, older than she remembered, harder, but unmistakably him. Fred Vance, looking for the scared little girl he'd left behind 3 years ago. Instead, he found 30 motorcycles idling in formation, their riders standing like sentinels. And on the wall, impossible to miss under the streetlights, his own face stared back at him, wrapped in accusation and barbed wire. He stopped the car. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Wrench stepped forward, phone in hand, camera recording. "Fred Vance, there's a restraining order filed against you as of 1 hour ago. You're currently in violation by being within 500 feet of Delilah Reeves. The police have been notified and are en route." As if summoned, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Fred's face contorted with rage. He threw open his car door, stepping out. "You can't keep her from me. She's nothing. She's under our protection," Mick interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "And you need to ask yourself if whatever you thought you'd accomplish here is worth what happens next." 2 patrol cars rounded the corner. The officers assessed the scene and moved quickly. Fred was in handcuffs within 3 minutes. Restraining order violation, the officer explained. He'd be held pending a hearing, possibly longer if the prosecutor pushed for it. As they loaded him into the patrol car, Fred looked past the officers, past the bikers, straight at Delilah, who stood on the clubhouse steps watching. His eyes promised violence, promised retribution. But Delilah didn't look away. She held his gaze until the car door slammed shut, until the vehicle pulled away, until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then she walked calmly to Mick's bike, climbed onto the hood, and opened her sketchbook to the page she'd started in the phone booth. A girl with wings rising above flames. Protection wasn't something borrowed anymore. It was hers. She added the final details by flashlight. The girl's face, her own face, was set in determination, not fear. The wings weren't borrowed from angels or bikers. They were hers, earned through survival, drawn in her own hand. "You okay?" Jess asked, sitting beside her on the hood. Delilah considered the question. Fred was arrested, not gone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she'd stood her ground. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I am." The weeks that followed brought changes. Fred's parole was revoked due to the violation. The shelter downtown requested one of Delilah's pieces. She chose the image of broken chains transforming into wings, and it now hung where dozens of kids could see it daily. Her custom designs started appearing on bikes across 3 states as word spread about the club's talented young artist. Mick taught her to ride on his old Sportster, patient through every stall and wobble. 6 months later, she rode in her first club event, wearing a leather cut with club artist. First of her name embroidered across the back. She started a new project, protective gear for children. Helmets and pads covered in empowering designs. Warriors, heroes, symbols of strength. Gear that said you matter, you're worth protecting, you're stronger than you know. Her mother completed rehab and reached out. Delilah agreed to supervised visits, rebuilding trust slowly. But through it all, Delilah kept drawing. Every sketch, every design, every piece carried the same message she'd been sending since that first sketchbook left behind the dumpster. She was present, visible, and no longer afraid. This wasn't a whisper. It was a roar, loud as thunder, impossible to ignore, just like the family that taught her how. Delilah found her voice through art and her family on the road. Sometimes the people who save us don't look like heroes, they look like family. What would you do if you saw someone silently asking for help? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us why compassion matters. See you in our next video.